um, Lua. Um, ooh, interesting. Lua. It's like I always do a so we talking about running application at scale. But one thing
Yeah.
about Lua, Christian and Andy, have Argo CD have any history of security CVEs around running Lua scripts that people sent over? I'm asking because this morning I think I saw a CVE on Redis, like a high severity security CVE on Redis because they support
Yeah.
Lua, and you can send in a crafted Lua script and get access to things that you should not get access. So I was wondering if if you remember any issues or CVEs open
There
against
is
Lua.
some sandboxing that Argo does in terms of the Lewis scripts.
Yeah.
So I know I ran into some issues where I had to basically tell it that I had to do certain actions. I'll try to find that during the meeting here to see if I can find it. But there is some form of sandboxing, so it does constrain them to a bit.
Is that something that a user needs to configure, or you're saying
Yes,
like
yes. If they want to do certain actions, you have to. I remember I had to do it for. I'm trying to blank out what it was, but there was some. I will remember it when I find it. So give me a
okay,
few minutes to find it.
okay, yeah, yeah, that's the thing, right? We were for this book we've been talking a lot about running in production, right, at scale. So
Mhm.
I saw Lua, and I remember like, yeah, I can bring it up in the book club about what people would do, because people run this in production, right? Is and they expose the Argo CD. Some people expose it on the public internet with a domain name. I see a lot of
Yeah.
so you can start scanning them and not like telling people recipes to Argo CDs out there. But you might need
Yeah.
the configuration that Andy said around Lua, or maybe turn it off. Is there an option to turn it off? I don't know at all. Maybe you don't need it. Do you know if Acuity running in has Lua support? Can I pass Lua?
Yeah. You can pass Lua support. Yeah. So
So
it's yeah. So there's no I don't remember anything coming through, but I remember um uh having to do with Redis. I think it was more on the Redis side than anything. I think we just needed to update the library or something like that. But other than that, I haven't seen any CVEs. It's pretty sandbox, like Andrew said, like all the operations happen pretty isolated. So we haven't seen anything. Doesn't mean
okay.
that one won't exist, but in the future, obviously. But I haven't seen anything come through.
Yeah. And then for people running Argo CD as a central control plane or management is sharing in their platform, internal platform, right? That is service. The thing to watch out is like if you have people submitting bad Lua code or complex Lua code, that will hit your resources, CPU memory. Like that's something that at scale, if you add a lot of those running, because they get evaluated, right? Um,
Yeah,
when they're like all these things gets evaluated, so that costs money at the end of the day, right? Because CPU and memory. So the next one is application health. Since we're talking with Lua, so this is something that I believe for what is it? Sync waves. You have to enable these Lua scripts for it to have a status if you're doing like apps of apps and you're waiting for one app to be sync wave
yeah,
ready to move to the next one because Argo is evaluating the health status of that app, Argo app, to deploy the
yeah.
next one. Is that
Let's
correct or not correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So, and there's a issue right there. So, like the related issue. I have a really funny story about this, but
I know the famous issue. Go ahead.
yeah, no, see, but basically, Argo CD has, like, we're talking
Correcto.
about Lewis scripts and application health checks, right? Argo CD has some built-in ones, right? Like there's some pre-made Lewis scripts that like are just there, right? Uh, Based on certain things, and but it Argo CD doesn't have a health check for the application itself, right? So the Argo CD application CRD, it was taken away. um it used to be there, but then it was removed in 1.8. So this is a long story, right? And I actually I did a presentation about this, right? About app of apps and about application health checks, and I was on the stage, and I basically said, and I'll say this because it'll embarrass me. I basically said, yeah, like that related issue, whoever posted that was dumb. They didn't know, like, they didn't know what they were talking about, right? After the talk, guess who comes up and talks to me? Was the
The guy
original
that submitted
creator
it?
of the issue.
Nice.
I was like, "Ooh, foot, mouth." Yeah. But he himself admitted, he goes, "Yeah, like after a while, like, he goes, I was trying to do something and it like was a snowflake issue." But anyway, long story short is that,
Really? From
yeah,
Twilio, right? Robert Del Petre.
yeah.
Interesting. I
He
haven't. I think
yeah,
I met him.
he was at ArgoCon, by the way, so you might have met him in passing,
Yeah.
Robert. He walked up to me, saying, "Hey, by the way, that was my issue that you were talking about." I was like, "Oh, foot mouth." But yeah. Anyways, the idea is that if you're doing app of apps, you're gonna have to put application health. So like in this chapter, I go over like examples, and I just put the application health is like, because in general, it's just a prerequisite for any sort of ordering you're gonna be doing. Like
Yep.
it's gonna have to be there. It's one of the things when I install. Everyone has their method of installing Argo CD. I have a Helm chart, and essentially my values file has this, like, it's like basically part of my
Mine.
default install.
I think
You
mine
know,
also. All my
yeah,
blueprints in AWS. I have this enabled.
yeah.
Um.
So it's just a good practice. So in general, I say, enable it unless you have a good reason to disable it. And
Yep.
what's a good reason? I'm not sure. I haven't really found a good reason to disable it. You might have run into the similar issues as this as the as the author of this issue is.
Yeah.
Maybe you're doing something similar, but
So it's
yeah,
required for SyncWave for ordering, but I want to say that is if you're not using it for ordering, it's just for bubbling up the health, right, of the things that you're deploying. So
yeah,
all resources are equal in Kubernetes. So you're deploying a config map next to a secret, next to two deployments, next to CRDs, five CRDs, and one of those CRDs happens to be an Argo CD, and the other ones are like custom CRDs, and the other ones
yeah,
are CRDs that Argo CD in their GitHub repo already have recipes. And then you're confused of like why some CRDs have like ignored, like Argo's telling you that is everything's fine and deploy, which is not, because you're not checking the health of the CRDs, including this app, Argo CD app. So I think that's a summary. Go ahead, Andy. I see your hand up.
I did find the security restriction. So access to standard Lua libraries are disabled by default. So that's a security measure, and I put the link into the chat.
yep,
You can
yep.
open them up if you want to, but they are disabled by default. So it does add a nice security mechanism that Argo does sandbox you a bit.
Which ones?
So the standard libraries for Lua, they're disabled by default. So you have just the very basic comparisons out of the box.
Okay,
If you want to do more complex things, you'll have to explicitly enable them.
I see. I see. Yeah, Lua is. I have written Lua, and it's not the funnest language to write. But I think AI now maybe or a language server. I don't know if they say Lua language server that can take objects from Kubernetes, but it's tricky to write those Lua scripts. Um,
Yeah,
moving on to eventual consistency. This is the I think we talked about this, right? Like
yeah,
checking like what
Yeah, we
makes
have. Yeah.
what are the strategies to make that you have ordering, or you're just waiting for everything to be eventually
yeah,
consistent. One thing that I want to highlight is maybe we have a small set of people. um, Put in the chat a trivia question. I was trying to come up with a fun
well,
trivia
do,
question.
do,
Like,
do,
go ahead.
am I eligible or no?
Andy,
No.
and Kristen cannot vote.
Okay.
So put yes or
Darn.
no. Can I put limit with a negative number, -1?
Ooh, yes,
That's
-1.
-1. Can I put -1,
I'm not
or
sure.
can I put 0? No, everybody needs to vote or guess. Put yes or no. Can I put -1?
I threw in something. Here we go. Yeah.
Say what's your take? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Who else? Matt says yes. Okay. The rest don't know, or they don't want to participate, or maybe they're not on the phone.
We
So,
don't care.
Christian, what does -1 means, or Andy?
-1 means never, always retry forever. There's no limit. So essentially, you're still doing the retry, but it'll basically,
I was reading.
it's basically unlimited, right? So
And it's
it'll
super useful. I used it in one of the corner cases that I have, which is crossplane. Because
Yeah.
crossplane, the way that you deploy crossplane is you deploy this CRD called provider, and you need to configure the provider. I think there's some noise background or some.
Sorry, it's my standing desk motor engine.
Okay. So I use it in crossplane because in crossplane you have to create this CRD called a provider for AWS or Azure, like a provider, and then you have to create the provider config specific to that provider. But the thing is, that provider is the one creating the next CRD. So if you deploy with Argo, on the first one, it would not work. So you have to wait until that CRD reconciles and it spits out more CRDs, and eventually the CRD will work, and then you need to retry again that provider config because now the CRD is there. Instead of the typical way of like you're deploying your types, all of types, and then you deploy things. This one is kind of tricky because this controller is creating more
Yep.
CRDs that you're needed. And to me, I spent like, well, AI didn't exist back then, but I spent like a week trying to figure out how to fix this until I found that reading the source
Create a script.
reading the
Yep.
source code, right? Reading the source code that I found that how to use backoff and duration and max duration
Yeah.
and the factor and all these items in here retry. I found that limit -1 is one of them, but the other ones are just so super useful on how
Yeah,
often do you want to retry.
I always that's actually, I think, a really good pattern that you use. I always put a really large limit for that same reason, and for that, and it always seems like I'm bad mouthing crossplane. I swear I like it, but crossplane is like one of the biggest offenders, right? Because
Yep.
and it's not necessarily crossplane's problem. You're waiting for like a cloud provider to provision something, so it's not necessary, like, you're just waiting for things. So
It's an
I always put a really
asynchronous
large
an asynchronous
limit.
action, basically.
Yeah, it's an asynchronous action, especially, right, exactly. And so so I always put a really large. I know Carlos does the shotgun
But
approach where he does negative
but
numbers.
I don't know what
I've
number
done,
to
yeah,
put. I don't know what number
yeah,
to put
yeah.
because
You
this
don't know
is
what
a
number to
recipe
put.
for people, right? This is
Yeah,
and
for me,
the
I think I put 20, and then if I'm having trouble, then I do a negative number. Like for me, I
yeah.
just put like a large number, and if that doesn't work, if 20 doesn't
Yeah.
work, I'm going -1. This
I
is
went
kind of
back
what I
and
do.
forth, and then talking to the team and evaluated. We went with recommending -1 because there's no that you want things to be ready, you want things to be get deployed, so it's okay to do -1, right? And then you have
Mhm.
Prometheus and alerts to give you like if something's going wrong, but -1 there's not going to be like once it does it, it stops, right? It stops when it's healthy. Like, it's not continues to retry, it continues into retries and it stops
Yeah,
doing heavy lifting or retrying. So if people think like it's -1 is going to continue retrying even if things are green, no, it just to get you to the green, and
yeah.
then it stops. Yeah. Um,
And I think this annotation
yeah. This
is,
also I needed that
yeah,
one. Yeah. Go ahead.
it's
Explain
very,
this
yeah,
one.
it's very important. So what Argo CD and like kubectl does this too, right? Like you have to turn this off. Same at kubectl, but basically you're doing a skip dry run on missing resources. That means
Long name.
Argo CD does a dry run essentially of a CRD, right? But it'll fail. So like if so basically, like if you're trying to apply a CR before the CRD gets applied, it'll fail, and it'll never work, right? When so skip dry run a missing resource, meaning ignore that error. It's essentially uh, uh, turning it off on kubectl. I forget what the flag is, but it's essentially equivalent to dry run equals false, or I forget what it is, but it basically says you're gonna it's gonna skip the dry run when the resource is missing. What's really, really cool about this annotation is it is basically harmless, because if the resource is there, it will still do the dry run. So the dry run will still happen, but only after it gets applied, right? So that way, and the reason you want that, right? The reason you want a dry run is for like schema checks, right? Like you want to make, like, if you're passing a string instead of a number or whatever, right? Like you still want the dry run, but maybe not initially, right? So this is kind of like more for like bootstrapping and things like that. But this annotation is basically harmless because it doesn't turn it off. It'll just skip it when it's missing, but when it's there, it'll do it. So.
Yep. I think I saw a hand up, Saif.
Yes. Hey, I want to go back to the retry. I thought like for a long time I thought like the Argo CD is eventual consistent, so it will just retry forever.
Yep.
So is it capped to something? Like there is like limit?
It would just sit there with the error. Like there's an error and it would not retry.
Yeah, but how many times it will retry by default?
I think it's 3 by default.
Yeah.
I need to look at the schema, but I believe it's 3. It'll try 3. Basically.
Yeah, 3. I think it's 3.
I think it's 3. Yeah, 3-minute intervals, or however many.
All these things have defaults. If you look in the source code, they have, maybe they're not in the docs, but I remember seeing them in the source code.
So because
I think every minute, it tries for like 3 times, gives like a minute interval or something. I remember waiting. Thinking of configuring it.
Yeah, and the max duration it's 3. It's so basically here's the defaults in case anyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's like the default there.
Yeah, that's how it's 5. Like retry limit is 5, and then the other option. So it's 5 safe. So it's not forever. So that's why you need the negative one, and the negative one, I put it there. It's harmless in cases, but if you don't know, then don't put it everywhere. Like put it in the place that you actually need it, like cross-plane or something that you cannot do through the other strategies, which is eventual consistence or sync waves, or like you cannot do it like it's last resource, but it's there.
And that annotation, I think, helps a lot with a lot of things. Like I would say 80% of the use cases, you probably don't even need to change the retries. But for like, if but then now we're talking like, the other 20%, like the enterprises, large, things that are, like you're waiting for crossplane to do something, script dry run and missing resources, set limit to like -1 or, 1,000 or whatever you want to, something ridiculous. So it becomes, and then that's kind of like you're talking about eventual consistency, right? Argo CD will basically just kind of keep trying.
Yeah. One thing that I would say with skip dry run. This is a long name. Skip dry.
I know.
Skip dry run on missing resources and this type of annotations. I think we discussed it last time. Was sometimes you get a Helm chart from a vendor or from another team, and you don't have the ability to create the annotation. Or sometimes these Helm charts, and usually by default, has a schema that will allow you to add annotations, but it would add it to every resource, the config map, the deployment, the service, but not individual resource. So maybe you want to add this one to one of the resources, but not everything. So you have to use the strategy that Andy mentioned in the last sessions, like patch that Helm chart with customize and things like that. Sorry, somebody was going to talk, and then we're going to talk.
Matt has his hand up.
Andy, I think you were talking. Andy, talk over you or somebody.
Hey, sorry, is it okay if I ask a clarifying question right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I have actually 2 questions. I'll try to be real quick here. One, I just wanted to clarify how that retry works. I think Saif brought this up. He mentioned that Kubernetes will always reconcile things forever, right? So I want to make sure I understand this right. This is retrying Argo CD applying the resources to the cluster in the first place, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because that might fail. Like, for example, if there's no
CRD
missing, incorrect, or CRD is missing. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Or connectivity issues if you're on a remote cluster, and a million
Or
different
if you're giving
reasons.
a presentation at a conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so and then that actually kind of leads me into my next question too. I have to admit, I'm still confused about how that annotation works below skip dry run on missing resource. Because like in my experience, I've literally used crossplane before, and I know what Carlos was talking about with the providers not finished yet,
Provider
so you
config.
can't
Yep.
apply things yet. Like in theory, wouldn't retrying alone be enough? Because eventually, like the CRD would exist, and eventually the sync would succeed.
No.
No, because the whatever you do, whatever resource that ends up creating the CRD never gets applied because it does the validation first. So until
It's a
that
group.
validation passes, it will never actually had a chance to actually apply it.
So
If they're separated,
the dry run is like on the 10 components. So if one of them is sick, none of the other ones will go through. That means, Andy, that's what.
Yes.
yeah. So what I typically do is, in many cases, separate them out into separate applications.
If you can, yeah.
So it does get away around that if you don't want to go down the path of adding the annotation. So we talked earlier about some Argo CD or Helm parts where you can't do it very easily. That's one way you can potentially get around that.
Oh, so if we weren't using sync waves, it would be okay because everything would get synced at once. But because we are using sync waves, like it gets stuck.
No other way
The
around.
dry run,
No.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, I need
it's
to
more of the
get this
issue
out of
if
the
you have
rewrite.
everything all in one application. Everything in one application. How you mentioned how let's wait until crossplane reconciles, right? But how will our crossplane ever get the resources for it to deploy whatever it's deploying if it's part of that same application?
I'm assuming that the provider or like whatever is the beginning of that chain is also in the application.
Right.
So
And that will never get created.
Yeah. So say you have a CRD and a CR in one application. Let's take away sync waves. It doesn't exist, right? So you just have those, a CRD and a CR. If Argo CD applies those, it applies them as like a single unit, right? It doesn't treat them as it basically
okay.
It's basically the equivalent of kubectl apply -f and you give it a directory, right? Like it won't like it'll fail.
I use the analogy of if you're going to go ahead and launch a missile, you need to have multiple people give a thumbs up, turn their keys, etc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they need to go ahead and have all the resources turn their keys before it actually fires. And since this one will fail, nothing ever gets fired.
Yeah. I was picturing it working like it was a bunch of individual kubectl apply operations.
No,
now this
it's
makes
just a
sense
single one.
The whole thing fails, and then
the whole thing fails.
Can't start.
Yes. Yep. So now when you're doing sync waves is kind of what you're thinking now is you're treating them, you're applying them as individual files. So with sync waves. So if you're using sync waves, that quote unquote should just work, right? There's other things that could come into play or whatever, but like let's just talk conceptually right now. Yes. So with sync waves, if even one under one app, you can say CRD, -1 CR 5, right? So that way, like it'll apply the CRD first, and then it'll apply the CR. I still think skip dry run missing resources is because it's harmless. Kind of removes kind of like a little like race condition, like because sometimes race conditions happen. QB API server gets overloaded, like things go out of order, like it's some of these like edge cases, like you want to kind of avoid that. And since the annotation is pretty much harmless, I always recommend people using it.
Yeah. So this is an example that I have. This is a project called the GitOps Bridge, which I don't know why I name it like that now, but it's a bridging like infrastructure as code to GitOps. It's basically like I should have called it like best practices application set, but it's around application sets. And this is one of the repos is a repository of Helm charts for useful things. And one of the things is Crossplane because Crossplane doesn't have official Helm chart. So I created this with Azure, and between Azure and AWS, we were able to create this. And this is usually I point people as an example of like using sync waves for the runtime config in Crossplane has sync wave equals 1. Then the families have sync wave equals 2. Providers is sync wave equals 3. and then the provider config, because the other ones are creating the CRDs for this one, then I have to do the skip dry run on missing. And I think the whole app at the level of the application set, I put -1 to keep retrying because it takes time for this CRD to show up. Yeah, and then that's how I use it. So if some people want to see an example, this is one that I always come up with. Skip dry run and sync waves to do in a certain order, and it will save you a lot of like headaches. And a lot of people use it. Just wanted
Cool.
to show like a tangible example. If
Yeah,
people want to
thanks
see
for
it.
helping clear that up for me too.
Let me see. Move to back. And again, give us feedback if you like this type of discussions in the book club. This book is a little bit dense, but it's for a good reason, right? If you want another book that is more high level, then get another book from Christian, which is the GitOps Path, right? That's a more high level one. This one is super useful, at least for me, because it goes deep into the things that you hit in production. What else we have? Inspecting probes. This one is the health, the liveness probes, the readiness. I think we discussed that. The readiness. Argo doesn't care that much. App sync waves. Did we discuss sync waves? I don't remember. Savvy, do you remember? If we explain to people what sync waves are.
I think we didn't get there. Well, I'm not sure now.
I think we did. It's been like, I don't know, 12 weeks, so maybe we did, maybe we didn't.
So yeah, I think we did. I think we didn't cover application sets. Using
we did. Yeah,
this
we
is
did
ordering
chapter
through
5. We did it in chapter 5.
Progressive syncs. I think this is specific to progressive sync, and we can talk about like when is it going to be not experimental. I have a lot of people saying I will use it in production, but it's experimental. Any news on that?
That I don't know. Progressive sync and sync impersonation. One day, I forget, long time ago, Michael Crenshaw showed me a doc that explains the bacon period. Because because like basically with Argo CD it goes from alpha, and then for a long time, and then it goes for beta for one release, and then it just goes to GA.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Intuit's using it in production. So
some other people are using it in production.
I mean, a lot of people are using production, but it is still technically, I think beta now. I think no, it's still alpha. It's still alpha. I think there's an issue with daemon sets, and I forget the issue number, but there's an issue with daemon sets. I think that is still.
Yeah, I think there's corner cases that people have found issues. So maybe that's why the community wants to. But if you're not hitting those corner cases, then you're good. So can you go over like explain how they work? This progressive sync works in application sets.
Yeah. So when we talked about app of apps, right? You can order app of apps. So you have an application that deploys other Argo CD applications, and you add sync waves, right? So like you want app 1, app 2, app 3 to go in that order. And application sets, and I think this was like in chapter 5 or whatever, but to reiterate, application sets can be seen as an application factory. So its only job previously was to generate applications. That's all it did. It was kind of like, you fed it in something. It was basically, it generated applications. And so, but people wanted a way to order those applications, but there was no way of ordering them with application sets because that wasn't its job, right? It was originally just created. And so someone from Indeed actually added something called progressive syncs into application sets, which basically gives you the similar functionality of app of apps, right? Baseline functionality, yes. You can basically say, based on labels, I'm going to deploy an application, wait until it's healthy, and then move on to the other ones. And this is basically based on labels, but it also has concepts of like surging and max surging, right? Like if you want to say, oh, hey, yeah, like this application set generates like 1,000 applications, actually just do 10% at a time. Right. I want you to do 10% at a time, or you can group applications together. It's like, the back end should go first, but the front end, there's like 800 front ends. They can just go next because I don't have to wait for each front end, right? Like if you're doing microservices or something. And so anyway, just to kind of wrap it all up in a nice bow, progressive syncs is a way to order applications if you're using application sets, especially if you're using application sets heavily.
Yeah, it's a gate. You can put a gate on the apps that the application set is deploying, and then you can say a gate saying like 10% at a time, like in waves. It's in experimental. I gave a talk with Adobe in the last ArgoCon and talk about how to group that progressive deployment on application sets in terms of, instead of using this, they have a lot of clusters. They have 400 clusters and a lot of add-ons. So it was more for the add-ons on like grouping the clusters into, they use letters like group A of production, group B of production, group C of production, because they have so many. So they will put 20 clusters in group A of production and group B. So they would do it in a it's sync wave, but in other places they're called like progressive rollouts or cascading. So you will do 20. The group A may have 20, but group B may have 40. So you feel confident that you did the first 20. They're good, and then the other ones, and then you all do that by labeling the clusters. So it's an alternative way of doing progressive sync, but you could do it in progressive sync. And me and Adobe, we started looking into how do we move that logic into progressive sync. But as these systems are very critical, right? It needs to be battle tested, so it takes time to migrate. But right now they're doing it with labels, that grouping.
Yeah.
I think somebody was going to ask a question, or Patrick or something. Okay, no,
Patrick left.
So yeah, you will see them in the UI, and also take into account, talking about progressive, also that's applicable to other projects like the one in Michael is working, and also the one from Acuity, Cargo. So that's also other ways, other strategies, or the tools to progressively deploy things into Kubernetes or across clusters, right? In this case, application set can be used across clusters.
Yeah, and I think one thing, and I want to talk about this, and I think this might get better for the new when the newer version of Kubernetes coming out. So like you can put in app of apps, you can put in sync waves, you can put in health checks, you can use application sets. However, I do want to stress that you should try to rely on visual consistency as much as possible, only because things may not happen in order even if you set them up. So there's an issue, an Argo CD issue upstream about race conditions, right? So like basically high level is that like if you're using like progressive syncs or even app of apps, the status goes, so like the current status and like the reported status are out of sync, and out of sync long enough for Argo CD to think that you were done syncing, meaning that it'll set the sync, it'll set like the first app to start syncing, and then it'll check the health, but the health says healthy, so it'll then move on to the next one, but the first one hasn't even started yet. And so and this is an issue that's just in Kubernetes in general, right? I think improving the cache, I think there was like the cache improvement in terms of like statuses for Kubernetes that is coming up. I think Carlos, you mentioned it like a couple weeks ago. That may help with this a little bit, but just keep in mind, like it's still Kubernetes, right? And like there's still issues around Kubernetes, around statuses and things like that. So just keep in mind, right? Like just keep in mind in terms of like, even if you're ordering, even if you're doing even if you do this chapter all the way, right? If you do like Carlos ran into this, even if you do everything right, you might still run to race conditions. And it's just the way the way it is, right? So just kind of the issues right there on I put it in the chat.
And the other thing I want to add is like take it more simple. Like, did we discuss this? Like, Argo CD and Helm has a native order. Like, for example, let's take a simple example: a deployment and a config map. A deployment is referring to a config map. So should I deploy the config map first and then the deployment? Can I deploy deployment first and then config map? I think Helm, maybe Andy can answer, has an internal list when it does like you,
It does have
right?
an internal list, yes.
Does Argo has that same internal list or a different one, or doesn't have a that list? I think it does.
It does have a list, yeah.
And it's very
Internally,
short,
yeah.
and it's like well-known things, right? A deployment, config, map secrets. But then we have CNCF projects that then we created before there was no CRDs, right? Before CRD, like then become CRDs, and everybody wanted to create a type. So now it's like a
Yeah.
thousand types out there. So which one do you know? Which one goes before what? So that's where your need to be careful. But at the same time, like Christian said, like in an ideal world, and let's take for example, like so, let's close this with a trivia. People know what would happen if I deploy a deployment and then wait a minute or 2 minutes, and then that deployment depends on the config map, but I haven't deployed the config map, and then I deploy the config map. Would the pod will be stuck forever? Should I always deploy the config map first before the deployment? What would happen in this use case? Do I care? Do I don't care? What happens if I deploy a pod that refers to the config map and the config map is not there? And
It's
then I
fine.
put it.
It's fine because they'll just retry.
And it's a trivia, so people should be
I'm sorry.
guessing. What people
It
think is
feels
going to
like the
happen
deployment will fail. It
will
feels like
fail.
it just.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember somehow having this issue, but yeah, my vote is it will fail.
Okay. Sebi says it's going to fail. So stuff will fail for sure.
Pod should
Anyone
restart,
else?
right? In general.
Sorry?
Pod should restart in general, right?
But never started.
It never
It's
gets
the
scheduled.
deployment.
It never gets.
Oh,
it's
it never
just
gets scheduled.
pending.
Yeah, yeah. Ah,
It's
okay, yeah,
pending.
yeah. It never does get scheduled. Yeah.
Oh yeah, actually.
I think it gets scheduled.
It gets scheduled, but it doesn't
It's
actually get.
scheduled. I know.
It'll say pending. It'll say pending because it never gets assigned. Pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear from Saif. He seems to be.
Oh yeah.
I thought like I
Interesting.
would follow the logic, which I know that Kubernetes is consistent, like eventually consistent, so it will keep trying until the
Yeah.
template or the manifest is ready to be applied and running.
Okay. So partial answer, let's answer that one and the second one. So yes, the deployments or the pod will be created, will be scheduled, it will get to a node, but it will be in pending because the config map is not there. And then who's responsible for, and then I put the config map and the config map is there. Who is responsible for like starting it? Is it the kube API server or the kubelet?
Both, because it's the kubelet that calls the API, right?
So at that point, the API server is its job. You gave me a config map, I just put it in the etcd. Goodbye. At that point, it's the kubelet handling the retries. So when things are missing or not working, kubelet would just wait 1 minute, takes a while, right? The 1 minute, and then retry again to see if things are there, and then the container will start. So that's how that things happen under the hood. So I don't know
So
it
okay,
was a
I
good
was wrong.
trivia or not.
Yeah.
But I don't ask those things in interview, so don't worry. But it's good, right? That this is why. But then this is, and then you will ask like, well, why Helm and Argo will have a list of things in order? They don't have to be in order. They don't. But if they're in order, you save that 1 minute, right? You don't have to get the kubelet error out and then retry. So if you give it some hints of like deploying things in order, then it will go that order. But take into account that things like, I believe, to correct me, Andy, like it will do the apply, but it would not wait for conditions to be like done. So for example, sometimes you kubectl apply in order, but since API server and etcd are so fast, sometimes it works with the kubectl-f in a folder. But actually, if you want to do it correctly, you have to wait for a condition for things to be stable. For example, a CRD may take 30 seconds to be stable before you can actually like apply something. So it's tricky. It's not always visual consistent. Like for example, for CRDs, they depend on webhooks, and mission webhooks and validation webhooks. They have to be running, and a server needs to be listening for that webhook. So you have to give it enough time for the CRD and the controller that is going to receive that validation implementation webhook to be up before you can apply the CR for the CRD. So yeah, the good thing is Argo CD and Flux, those things are very helpful for helping you that if you're going to just do it with Bash and kubectl. But yeah, before Flux and Argo CD existed, we had to do it with Bash and sleep commands. If that makes sense. Any comments? I think we're at the end. But people can tell how much I love the eventual consistency not working.
Yeah.
To be honest, I wasn't extremely happy when I saw Argo CD was trying to create some order to things. Although I am fully aware that this is something you need in real life, I was really into like relying on eventual consistency and that only, and doing nothing else. But in real life, you can't always do that. So you have certain dependencies in every type of application or platform. So
yeah, and this is like day one, right? I think it's day 0, day 1, on like getting all these Argo CD show up in red and in nice greens and everything like that. Then the next wave of work happens of like what happens with like things get deleted or not working or they failed or they cannot connect to things. Then you have to have like your
edge cases,
monitoring, alerting, and then putting resiliency, and then your post. Did we talk about post hooks of like validating that things are correct and working and emitting metrics? I think we discussed hooks.
Yeah, that was in chapter 5.
Yeah, so that's we already talked about that. Like once you deploy something, you need to check that it's working. How do you check that it's working? Is Fluent Bit sending logs to Splunk? We'll go to Splunk to see if there's logs. Is it emitting metrics? We'll check if there's Prometheus metrics available by this component. It's not just like the condition is status in Kubernetes telling you like it's running, yay, but it's not connecting to anywhere, and there's a bunch of errors in the logs, right? So I'll finish with that. It sounds like a rant, but it's more advice on things. Any last questions? And then we'll continue next week with extending Argo CD. And I know Christian and Andy are experts on this, and Christian have done a lot of talks, I think, right? And work in the open source project on plugins. Okay.
Yeah.
So until next time, thank you so much for people that joined today. I hope you're enjoying
Thank
the
you,
session
everybody.
and join next week.
All right.
Cheers
Yeah.
all. Bye-bye.
See you next week.
Thank you.
Talk later. Bye.
Bye.